everybody, and welcome to episode number 29. I mean, technically, because we actually put together another podcast that you can check out on our YouTube channel that will drop down in the comments below to talk about our very first Big 12 basketball tournament with a fellow podcaster from OSU. So that's Oklahoma State University, not the Ohio State University, that we will be playing tomorrow, which for our first Big 12 tournament game. So make sure you check that out. As a reminder, we are the only podcast that features a former UCF National Champion, a former UCF host, an infamous rapper, an IG star, shooting the breeze, talking UCF Sports. And before we get to talk to all of those guys, well, not all of those guys, because a few people decided to dip out on us, let's go ahead and bring in Nobra, the producer. And actually, he was putting in work before this recording because I completely flubbed the introduction twice. So thank you, Nobra, for giving me the opportunity to get two goes at that. Usually we just wing it and we're off the cuff, but this week I managed to mess it up. So welcome back, Nobra.
Thank you.
What? Dude, I gave you a hard time last week about your intro.
Too late for me to say hello. You talked for a minute before. It's too late for that.
No, you're supposed to like, hey now.
Oh.
And he's eating. Bro, what are you doing on our YouTube channel right now?
You're so good.
You have to wait like 5 minutes to stick something in your mouth.
Oh, good.
Okay. Let's go ahead and move on from that intro. Josh is going a little crazy. Ben Stout, I'm going to welcome you to the stage next. What's up, Ben? How are you?
Way too many. That's what she says. We're just like
I was going to say, how do you
through my brain when you were talking to Nobra there. But what's up, guys? Good to see y'all. Good to talk with y'all in another episode of the United Ones.
Yeah, super excited to get this one underway. This is my second episode for today, so excited about that. And last but not least, but always last, Josh Lazar.
I'm vanilla, baby. Baseball choke, but they still awesome winners, baby. Getting love in the O like a Marja, baby. Dropping dimes like a QB Rager, baby. And I screwed the last thing up. I ain't got no. I almost got it. Almost got
it. I like that one because you dropping you came up with your own.
Yeah, I'm dropping dimes like my QB RJ, baby. I almost got it. Almost got it. Baseball still choked.
Almost, but not quite. All right, Nobra, since you screwed up your intro and you're eating on my show right now, can you at least give us a decent hair flip? All right, thank you. All right, he's off the show now. I love him, but he's got to get that intro right at some point, right? Like at some point, he has to get that intro right. All right, guys. I am, we're going to be talking about a loss first, but I'm going to be popping my collar while I can because we are having a little bit of issues here in the great Northwest Panhandle with my internet, so I could pop out at any particular time. But first, before we get to that, let's get to a little bit of text talk for UCF Hoops. So this week, what is your text talk?
As usual, I'm extremely unprepared with the text talk, so I don't have any this week.
Oh my goodness. Josh, can you save this show? I mean, seriously.
I mean, obviously not, since my impromptu rap was all messed up. Fell asleep in the back of a car on I-4, woke up to a decent score. So I was down in the Tampa area and Sarasota for most of Saturday, which was good because during the ride back, I was both in traffic because of the Strawberry Festival, since I think Flow Rida was the musical act that night. So that was the backup always on I-4 during the Strawberry Festival. And I'm going to keep vamping now because you're going to give me the signal to wrap it up, and I'm going to make it another 15
minutes. I just did. Like, I know. Everybody who's watching the YouTube channel is like, everybody knows what this means, Josh.
I know that, and I'm just gonna go right past it. So I was watching the game on my phone in the back of a car, and I fell asleep during halftime. I woke up and I'm like, "Hey, we're still in this game." So yeah, I got to watch the whole game on my phone while driving back from Tampa. But I watched it to halftime, and you never know what happens after halftime at a UCF basketball game. So this time with TCO, a little bit better.
Okay, so let me ask you this: did you squeal with happiness?
I did not quite squeal with happiness. It was a light shriek, but I don't know. Wasn't quite a squeal, no.
Okay, so not quite a beluga whale.
No, you're really trying to shoehorn this stuff like a voice noodle, man. I don't know what's going on here.
Okay. Yeah, that was too many in too short of a period of time. But let's go ahead and actually talk about the Cougs this week. You know, we're going to unfortunately have to start with a loss. If you guys remember, I said that after the first game, I thought that we would actually win this game. And for most of the game, we were in it. We led for quite a bit of it. We just kind of did that thing that we do sometimes during the season. The last 5 to 10 minutes or so, we let it get away. And what really, kind of drove it home for me is they panned in and zoomed in on Allen. Not our Allen, obviously, Shemari Allen. And it was about 10 minutes left, and he had his hands on his hips, and he just looked into the camera. And it was just a look of, I don't know what to do, right? And Cryer just was absolutely phenomenal. We held him in check for most of the game, but was absolutely phenomenal in the last few minutes of the game. Yeah. So, overall, again, this is the number one team in the country. This team played with the number one team in the country. They just couldn't finish the game. So overall, field goal percentage, we shot well. That's what we were worried about, right? 45.5%. We actually outshot Houston, 45.5 to 43%. From 3-point land, another dismal showing for us, 3 for 10, so 30%, right around where we've been hovering at 32, while Houston was 8 for 24. So they shot a few more threes than we did. Nothing crazy, nothing lights out. And this was a hard fought and hard-nosed game. From the charity stripe, 9 for 18 for Houston, 50%. So versus our 69.6, which is around what we do. We out-rebounded them 32 to 31. Offensive rebounds, though, they're all about second chance points. Kelvin Sampson, we talked about it before the game. They are phenomenal when it comes to second chance points and being in the right spot and hustling to make sure that they're flying in for a rebound. Our guys will box out and they get ready to jump to get the ball, and then all of a sudden it's gone, right? Because they have somebody flying into the paint to grab that with energy. Defensively, though, 22 defensive rebounds versus 15. Assists, about the same for both of us, 11 and 10. Steals, about the same, 9 and 7. Blocks, we did what we do, the number one blocking team in the entire conference, at 5 blocks to their 3. Turnovers, 18 turnovers. So again, this game to me came down to offensive rebounds and turnovers. And this team has at times a tendency to just commit silly turnovers. They're not forced turnovers. It's just they're not paying attention, or they're trying to pass the ball somewhere. It just seems like they lost, and Houston made us pay 22 points off of turnovers this week. So, when you combine those things together, with the offensive rebounding that they had, they made us pay in the paint, and that's ultimately what decided this game, in my opinion. But hats off to Houston. They played like the number one team. It reminded me a little bit, I was thinking this, I didn't mention it in the text talk, but it reminded me a little bit of the 2017 football team. They never felt like when I was watching them that they were feeling any pressure during that game. Like
Yeah.
you looked at how they were playing, what their body language looked like, whatever. It was the same way that we looked at our 2017 team, and Trey talks about it all the time, where they just knew that they were going to win. And that's kind of what I felt with Houston. And I don't even think that they knew that they were going to win, but they would bring it close and they would have a chance to win. So, hey, there's a reason they're number one. They hustled, and we just kind of lost our footing down the stretch, and they overwhelmed us. So I'm gonna take a step back and let you guys wax poetic about this.
Yeah, I mean, it was a hard-fought game from the beginning, and we knew it was going to be just like the Iowa State game before that. I mean, when you play Houston, and we've obviously known this for years since we've been conference mates with them for a very long time. I mean, it's going to be a slugfest. It's going to be something that you gotta try your best to keep them off the offensive glass. They're going to be flying around on defense. They're going to create havoc for the team they're playing against. But guess what? That's what we do too, right? Like we create a lot of chaos on defense, and we're flying around trying to, get into passing lanes just like they do. And it's just a matter of who's going to be able to handle that type of pressure for a full 40 minutes. And it's one of the things that I, since I forgot my text talk and I didn't come prepared like usual. One of the things I did just remind myself in the text talk is especially Josh and I going back and forth on the text talk during the Houston game. And it was, we can keep up this intensity, but can we keep it up for a full 40 minutes? And that's just what Houston does. I mean, we got up to a great start. I think we were up like 9-0, or it might have been 7-0, but still we were up by a decent amount right out of the gate. But then they just make a run and they kind of bring it close. And we maintained that lead all the way through. While it was a short lead most of the time, we kind of each team went on a run. We maintained that lead all the way through until about, I don't know, I think it was about 3 minutes into the second half, maybe 4 minutes into the second half. And they went on a run that was enough for them to take the lead. And that just seemed like once they got that, they were just like, all right, now we're done messing around. We're going to win this game. And one of the things that was our advantage going into this game, that something that we've talked about all year, is that we have some quality depth in our lineup. And unfortunately in this game, and you always, as the season rolls on, as the season gets closer to March, like you don't play 10 deep in late February and March. Like very rarely do you see a team that plays 9 or 10 players, every game, like quality minutes every game. And so it's not surprising that we've basically, tightened up our lineup for the most part as far as our rotation goes on the court. But you saw this as an opportunity playing against a team that plays as hard as Houston does, but probably has the most top-heavy rotation in the entire country. They have 5 players that essentially play almost the entire game. They have they kind of have a rotation of 6 players, but even in this game, 0 bench points for Houston. And so you would say, all right, so we that's our advantage, right? But we unfortunately were only to get quality minutes out of Tierno Silla in this game. I thought he had a very good game.
Man,
against
Silla.
Houston. Yeah, well, we can get into that, but I thought not to move forward too soon yet. But I thought he did have a good game. He was probably the only one.
He's getting better. Like the last 2 or 3 games, he's been playing. But it felt like he's coming into his own in a role where he's a net positive on the plus minus.
Yeah, and I thought that what he brought that I was so excited to see in this game against Houston is that energy. He matched and exceeded the level of energy that you have to play at when you're playing against a team as relentless as Houston is. I mean, they're the number 1 team in the country for a reason. They have talent all throughout their starting lineup, and they're a legitimately, great defensive team. and they turned that defense into scoring on the other end. And what happened at the very end, I mean, the last 5 minutes of the game, I mean, this is unfortunately when we're playing against the number one team in the country, they got some dudes on their team. And LJ Cryer just completely took over the last 3 or 4 minutes of that game. He just basically said, I'm not going to miss the rest of the way. I'm taking over this game. I'm going to be the guy that's going to take the big shots. And unfortunately, they got 3 or 4 of those dudes on that team. But LJ Cryer was the one that stepped up in that moment, and we just couldn't quite handle it. And I'm with you, Roger. Like you said about Shemari Allen's kind of body language at the end. It's surprising to see that from somebody who's such a good leader and such an energy guy in himself, like Shemari Allen is. So it's not really a knock on Allen in the sense of noticing that. I think it's more of just an example of what the Houston Cougars do to any team that they face. And unfortunately, we were able to really play them tough, but we weren't able to play them tough for a full 40 minutes. And when you're playing against a team like that, you have to bring it at an extremely high level for the full 40. And so, we saw some good things throughout. I think DJ played a great game against the Big 12 Player of the Year in Jamal Shed. I thought he played a pretty good game, but unfortunately, it was probably one of the roughest games for Diallo in a long time, especially on the offensive side of the basket. We needed to have him have a very good game and kind of impose his will and his size, because we did have a size advantage against Houston. And unfortunately, especially on the offensive end, he brought some good things on the defense, which you always expect because he's consistent there. But it was probably the first time in a while that when he would catch the ball in the post,
kept bringing it down.
Yeah, it was more or less. It was even more so about just him bringing it down. It just seemed like he was just very unsure of himself with the ball, which is something I haven't seen in a while. But I mean, they kind of suck in there on the defense. The double team, kind of confused him, and it was just a rough game from an offensive standpoint. And it just didn't quite work out. We weren't able to kind of impose our will as far as our size goes. And then last thing I'll say is man, they're a good offensive rebounding team for a reason. And they're very relentless on the offensive glass, but man, the ball just seems to bounce to them at the most opportune times. It's just wild. It's just crazy to see some of these like long shots that they would
go way back out. And
I mean, it was just crazy to see the bounces just go their way as well, which, much like the analogy to the 2017 UCF team. I mean, you got in order to have a successful season and be number one in the country like that, you got to have a few things bounce your way along the way. And that's what happened in this game with the offensive rebounding for Houston. Not just their effort, but it did seem like a couple of those bounced their way as well.
I will say that when LJ Cryer he started getting hot, right? I yelled arugula a few times because we're a clean show. Because I had in the holster, I had a meme, the Jordan meme with LJ Cryer ready to go,
right.
And it just completely blew up my spot. I was inconsolable at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So as the only one here who was actually at the game, it was.
That's why we lost.
Why we lost,
that
right?
is not why we lost.
I've
been at games where we've won. Thank you very much. That's over now. But
what's your win-loss percentage, Josh?
1-4, maybe. It's not my fault. Yeah, how about we not play top 25 teams every other game? I will tell you.
Fun.
So it was. All of you are right, but that effort thing is a big deal. Like the effort between the first half and the second half was different, and I don't know if it was tired. I don't know if it was they felt like they were doing good, or did Houston step it up way more? Maybe that's part of it too. Maybe the Richard Horse Sampson, he went in hard on them at the second half, and during that break just kind of really got into them. I will tell you that Cryer was interesting. Cryer did not do well at the beginning of that game. Like that, he did not have a lot of
We held
points
him in
whatsoever.
check. It
We
wasn't
held,
just him that
mostly
the
everyone in
defense
check.
held him in check. And I will tell you this,
weren't
by the way.
happening as much. Yeah.
But by the way, real quick, you asked a question. You said you didn't know whether, what the difference was in the second half. I will tell you what the difference was in the second half.
Okay.
Houston made adjustments.
Yeah.
They did not come out and play the same way in the second half. And I don't mean by effort. I just mean by defensive adjustments. If you looked at how they were playing, they made Kelvin Sampson did what he does because he's a good coach. We can, we can talk about, his future career as a stripper on the sidelines or not, but he absolutely right. He absolutely is a phenomenal X's and O's coach, and he knows. And not only that, but he coaches the team in a way and gets them to buy in a way that they do and execute what he says. Right? It's not just Johnny Dawkins is yelling about this, that, or the other. And I'm not saying Johnny doesn't, but like I know that Johnny's telling the guys to do certain things during the game, and they're not executing on it. Yeah. With Kelvin Sampson-led teams, they 100% are executing on it. I can tell you that Johnny Dawkins did not want us to throw 38 threes up in a game, right? Yeah. I can, with 100% certainty, say that they were not coached to do that, right?
And I could say it with 100% certainty because I heard it from him that he didn't tell him to do that.
So go ahead, Josh. I'm sorry. I wanted to answer your question because there is legitimate adjustments if you were watching the game and know what you're looking for, where they switched some of the things that they were doing on defense, and that impacted us. Pretty heavily.
I was calling for a box in one on Cryer at the end of the game, but I don't know if that's something they even practice. But I will tell you, there's a couple other things when you're at the game that weren't. I don't know if they were all as obvious on TV. The refs got about 3 calls really badly wrong, out of bounds calls.
But I don't know if that's for the course this entire season.
Like. So sometimes it's like ticky-tack foul. Okay, ticky-tack, maybe you don't hook as much as it looks like a hook. Those things, This was hand on ball on the out-of-bound stripe very clearly multiple times and didn't get it right. I think there was one or two makeups.
Those that you're talking about were terrible calls. Like they were just bad. Yeah.
There were some bad, So anyway, there's some of that stuff. I will tell you, the crowd, once we got behind and they had that little mini run to kind of elevate, not step on the gas as you can when you're coming from behind, lightly from behind. You can feel it. You're like, and I feel like that might have been what Shemari Allen was like. Oh. And that's kind of how it felt like. And again, let's be fair. This is the number 1 team in the nation. They've only lost 3 games, period. They only lost 1 game by any reasonable distance. And then when they got Kansas at home, understanding there's some players hurt, they shellacked them. I think they lost by like 25-30. So Houston won and Kansas lost by that. It's, when people say, look at the team, it's barely 500. I'm like, look at the team. If you look at the games, minus 1 or 2, like 1, One, I get it, but it's new to the Big 12.
They're barely not 500. I talked about this on earlier today on the OSU preview. 6 of 8 games decided by 1 bucket, like 2 points. I know.
That's wild,
6 out of 8 in the Big 12 losses by 2 points.
This season will be one of the biggest what ifs. Depending on how we do this week, then it'll be.
What if we had another shooter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's true. Seriously. What if like Matt Williams was still here? Like, right? Like,
well, he was there. He was just at the games in the stands. He's at every game.
We need him shooting from half court. It's what we need. But anyway, so you're 100% right. So anyway, it was just it was tough, but we held our own pretty well, and I feel like
I'm tired of saying that, Josh. This season,
this is not the American. right? We were like almost
Houston
doing
wasn't
well
the
in a
American before.
okay conference.
Yeah, but they
That's
were the American when it came to basketball, Roger. Like you can't say,
No,
"Oh, this is
SMU,
they came from."
SMU. No,
They were
SMU too.
the Houston
There's
was the
just
crown jewel of American basketball, and everybody knows it. Like
The last couple seasons, I'd agree, but before that, they weren't. It was up in the air. I mean, even we beat them. What was it? 2019. We beat them at home. Ended their streak.
Yeah, but they were a top 10 ranked team when we beat them,
What
and ended that streak. I mean, it wasn't like they were slouches back then.
Yeah, it's not like this is the Big East, who's one of the better P4, whatever we want to call this. Being just all right in the American is one thing. Being just all right and getting close in the Big 12 is a whole nother story. Now, we can't continue that trend over time. We need to be like TCU and get better and better and better, which we'll talk about, I'm guessing, in a moment with a good segue there. But this is not like, this feels like what if, and it is. But it doesn't feel that bad. I mean, I felt like we were going to get shellacked every single game and win like 2. And we did really well, and we'll see how we do in the
I agree with that, but I think to add on to that, the reason why some people feel like they're down on this season is because we weren't expecting to be competitive, right? And we were. It almost takes, I'll go back to when we talked about the preseason. I said 4. Ben, I think you said 5 games.
I said 4 as well. I said 4.
Okay, Josh, I don't remember how many you said. 3
I think
or 4.
Probably 4.
Yeah. So, we were all expecting max 4 wins, right? And we got 7, and we could have gotten a heck of a lot more. So I feel like it almost takes something where truly the team overachieved expectations, certainly for the Big 12 voters, right?
Oh, yeah.
We finished above 2 Big 12 teams, legacy teams, right? And I feel like that turned into a negative almost for the fan base because we were so close. And I feel like that should be looked at as a positive because we're not further away than what we thought we were, right? And I feel like, for me, this was the first enjoyable basketball season in a really long time. And I'll tell you why. It's kind of like what football was in the American. The American was a 2-bid league. You had to win 22 or 24 games, right, to even be in consideration. And you had to go deep in the tournament, right? If not win the tournament, to be assured a spot in the NCAA tournament, right? We didn't have to do that this year. So I didn't have to, my whole season didn't die when we had our 3rd or 4th loss.
Yeah.
I mean, West Virginia went 7-11 last year and made it to the tournament. This makes basketball more enjoyable.
Yeah, not only makes it enjoyable, it makes it enjoyable the whole season. I mean, the whole season, it makes it really, you're into it. And I agree with you, Roger. I think one of the things that all of us said in, when we were talking about before the season started, and obviously we're going to recap the TCU game, so I don't want to jump to the season recap yet, but still, a lot of us said 4 wins was about what I thought we were going to be at. If I was just going to be realistic about the expectations, 4 wins in the conference, I was going to be happy with that. But we all said, I mean, what we're looking for out of this team is just for them to compete, for them to show that they belong, and then see what happens if they could surprise some teams. And guess what? Because of the competitive, the competitiveness of this team, they were able to not only, win the games that they should have won, but they were able to, I guess you could say, quote unquote, surprise some teams and beat 3 ranked teams within their conference, beat Texas on the road in a tough environment. I mean, they have been able to accomplish things that, regardless of what you feel about his future at the university as the head basketball coach, you could objectively, in my opinion, say that this is the best job from summer to the end of the regular season. This is probably the best season overall that Johnny Dawkins and his staff has put together. And that's the complete package. That's getting the right guys in today's system. That's dealing with some guys that left last minute, right before the season started. That's not only getting the right talent on your team, but getting the right talent that actually fits what you're trying to do as a basketball coach in your system that you're trying to implement. And then getting all those guys to buy into their roles that they have on the team and be a star within that role. And I feel like that's a huge credit to the players because they absolutely did that this season. I think with the exception of maybe a couple of, stragglers here or there, like every single player completely bought into everything that was going on in their role on this team. And that's a credit to the coaching staff with Dawkins at the head of it to put together this season and create those moments and experiences that we've seen with not only the 7 wins, but guaranteeing the first season in the Big 12. We are guaranteed a winning record, and that's exciting as well.
So, by the way, the basketball, like what I'll say about this, because you mentioned this season, right? This is the first time we've watched Johnny Dawkins basketball.
It is.
And what he's wanted to implement since his presser. Because I remember back in his presser, what did he say? He wanted the depth to play press. He wanted defense, and he wanted transition offense and fast break offense. This is the first season that we have seen that from Johnny Dawkins led team. So,
and I would argue since 2019, we have not been able to find the combination of players. Now, obviously, I understand who those players were. It was a mixture of his guys and the previous coach's guys. But I would argue since 2019, since that team, like you call it, we can put it on Johnny as well because he's recruiting the guys, but some of the leading scorers, some of the starting lineup, some of our quote unquote leaders have not been the type of guys that really play Johnny Dawkins basketball. And this season was a great combination, a great example of that. So you're absolutely right. I mean, this is, we finally got to see it. I mean, that's a good way to say it. Cause we're like, man, like, some of our, we even talked about it when we were on Nightline, Roger. I said, it's a little odd to me when you have a guy that is a walk-on and doesn't play, and I'm sure he's the best, the best dude ever. But if he's one of your captains, that's a problem with the leadership on your team. If you have a guy that is, and I love a guy like Levy Renault. Like, I mean, he's an awesome dude. Like, and he's a great leader, I'm sure, on the team. But it's like, if you don't have a starter as your main captain, it says something more about the starters, in my opinion. It says something more about your leading scorers, in my opinion, than it does about the leadership qualities of who they actually named captain. And that's what we've had in the past at UCF. And this season, this combination of guys is just a totally different experience. And it's fun. It's been a fun team to watch and a fun team to root for.
So, Josh, I'm going to let you talk, but I'm going to say this. I'm going to come back to Hendricks as an example of that. Go ahead.
Okay. I was like, you're going to let you talk, but I'm going to talk for a second. Now, I want to say this. So there are a lot of people in the fan base that are like, we should move on from Johnny. We've seen it. We've heard it. Let's talk about the fact that we are in like we're 61, 62 around there in net, right? And that's a big thing. That's how we get into a lot of these postseason.
Last I saw,
I think it's
61 as of today. 61 as of today.
So listen to this. We always wanted to win decent games. We have won 4 quad 1 games. Here are the list of top 20 net schools who have not won 4 quad 1 games. Auburn, who's 1-7 in quad 1 games. I'm putting my Allen hat on now too. We got Gonzaga, who's 3-5 in quad one games. Alabama, who's 3-9 in quad one games. St. Mary has 4, so you good. And San Diego State is 3-9. Dayton's 3-3. We can keep going down. Michigan State's 3-8. Do we have more losses than we would like? Absolutely. But we are 16-14 and 61 in the net and have more quad one wins than 4 people in the top 20. This is not the bad the American experience where, like you said, 2 or 3 or 4 games in, you're like, we can't win anything. We have to win the tournament. And what are we doing in March and late February? This was a good season to start. I think that's what I'd love to say to the audience and everyone. We would have loved to get some of those close games back. Maybe I needed to sell more tickets or not attend.
Yes.
But this was a pretty good season and better than, as a whole, better than hundreds of other schools. So I think this is, we would love to be at 20 wins. Hey, we got a shot maybe if we make a run. But let's see what happens. I think this is as good as we could have asked for than what we thought the Big 12 was. And Big 12 was probably even better of a basketball conference than we thought. And like Arizona and some other people are coming in next year.
All right. So Josh, I'm going to poke a little hole in what you just said and also what Ben said. So I want to make sure we're delineating this, right? There's a difference between having a overachieving in this season and having Johnny Dawkins be the leader that's going to take us to the top of this conference. Okay. I don't, yes, to, it was a fun season to watch. I 100% enjoyed it. I didn't feel as let down, in the hoops season versus what I did with football, right? In the Big 12. However, that's a different conversation from whether Johnny Dawkins, whether we collectively, you as an individual, me, or the AD, collectively feels that he is the right person to move us to the goals that we have, right? Now, there's a lot of qualifiers to that. We've talked about budget. We've talked about all this other stuff, and we're just now in a power conference. However, over time, if you look at the mean, is this the guy that's going to put us in, what Kelvin Sampson is? Is this the guy that can move us forward? And I'm just talking about results, not who he is, right? Because Johnny's completely different coach and a completely different approach. Although I will say that having seen some interviews outside of just the in-game interviews, Kelvin Sampson does a lot to foster relationships with his team. He just does it in a different way. So, to me, I want to make sure we're delineating that. Secondly,
which is why I started my statement by saying you can say what you want about the future, but this,
and I want to make sure we're bringing it back to that, right? Because that's a whole different conversation. And Johnny may make us believers next year. Who knows? Because I do think that he's going to get one more year, and I think he'll get an extension. And we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, right? That being said, the other point that you made was about the American. And look no further. A lot of those teams that you talked about that were going to the tourney in the G5 and the quad one wins, or, you know what I mean, versus what we have. Look no further than the Cows. 0 quad one wins. Right. Top of the American, regular season champs. We're top 25 until Tulsa did Tulsa things, which Tulsa always does, right? And in Florida, for whatever reason, the state of Florida teams in Tulsa just don't get along. I guess they're trying to prove, golden hurricanes are better than real ones. But they had the whole narrative around them has been they're not going to make the tournament regardless unless they win the conference tournament and get the auto bid because their strength of schedule isn't where it needs to be, right? So again, I do feel like if you put our team head to head versus the Cows, right now, and this has nothing to do with the rivalry or the past or anything else. Okay, so they have one quad win, win, right? But how many quad
Francisco
one?
FAU, right?
is 0-6.
What's
the
that?
real USF is 0-6. The University of San Francisco.
So they beat FAU.
I think they beat
Right?
FAU. I think so. I think that was their one quad win, but I'm not sure.
All right. So again, it's FAU.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and they didn't play like they did the last few years. So I'm sorry if I put FAU versus Houston or FAU versus Texas or FAU versus TCU or FAU versus Texas Tech. I feel like those teams come out ahead against FAU.
Well, the only way that the AAC could possibly be a two-bid league is if FAU loses in the championship game of the American, because they're the only ones in the conference, to your point, Roger, that have a really quality strength of schedule, because they loaded up their out of conference because they went to the Final Four last year and they brought everybody back. So
yep.
Yeah.
So going back to what I was saying about the Cows, and bringing that back to what I was trying to get at, which is ultimately at the end of the day, if I drop rivalry aside, everything else aside, right? And this is not Homer Roger conversation. If I dropped the UCF men's basketball team in the Sun Dome, right?
How would you do that?
Huh?
Why would you do that?
Well, I'm just saying, if I did that,
Okay.
that USF's best team or the Cows' best,
San
block
Francisco.
that out. The Cows' best team in probably a decade, right? I don't think they would come close to beating this UCF team. I think the quality of this UCF team, and I think what demonstrates it is the Big 12 conference, right? It's a rock fight. We've got depth. The only thing we're missing really is scoring, like another 3-point shooter to stretch the defense. I think that's the only thing that we're really missing, because as good as Sellers is, and he can shoot sometimes, he's really good in the paint. If we had another
mid-range game,
if we had another 3-point shooter that was a 38 to 40% 3-point shooter, I think this offensively, it would really open the door, especially for people like Diallo. You started to see him get involved in being able to stretch the defense, get it into the paint, and let him dominate the way that he's capable of dominating. So again, the Cows, I'm sorry, I hate to say this because I know it was the same thing that we used to have to deal with, which is we can only play who's on our schedule.
Right.
Huh?
I said right, yeah, but we're big time now.
Yeah. But that's the point, right? But I think the quality of team that we have, if I'm looking at it objectively, and truly I'm saying this objectively, I feel like we go there and we wipe the floor with them. To be honest, we're just that physical. We have the depth, and I feel like we could body them. If we can run with Houston, right? If we can body some of these other teams in the Big 12, I truly feel like the Cows wouldn't have a chance. That being said, let's go ahead and transition to TCU. And Josh, great timing on that note, because that's exactly where I was going with that. So I'm going to say this. I've got my collar pop, Josh. It's time to pop your collar, sir, because we did beat the Horned Frogs, which. So I'm just not going to say anything about that. One thing that irritates the holy heck out of me, I'm going to ask you guys a question before we start this. Who is the bigger Richard Equine? Is it going to be Kelvin Sampson on the court or TCU head coach Dixon? And I'll hold my comment on that until the end.
I was I even comment because I rewatched the game tonight because I wasn't able to watch it live, and I was watching the game tonight. And I pointed out a few times where I was like, I rewound like 10 seconds just to show my wife. I'm like, check out this guy losing his mind on the sideline. I mean, it didn't matter what was happening in the game. He literally looked like his like head was going to explode. He looked like a cartoon character at certain points of this game. So I gotta say. Jamie Dixon probably takes that cake because that was just his demeanor throughout the game. And I haven't watched too much TCU basketball this year, but I mean I'm familiar with Jamie Dixon from his time at other schools, but still it was interesting to see him literally just lose it at multiple times in the game. So I say Jamie Dixon.
All right, Josh.
Yeah. I gotta go Dixon. I tend to agree. And you know what? I don't think a UCF team has ever beaten a Jamie Dixon-led team because he beat us when he was at Pitt at least once, if not twice. And so I was at the game at the Madison Square Garden where we played him when he was at TCU starting off. And I will tell you, I was not happy about it. But the people in the crowd, like the old heads who got a free ticket to come to a game, when they saw Taco, they're like, "Oh, there's gonna be something there." There's like everyone kind of saw it. It's kind of it was kind of mulling. Was it Taco in there? I think it was Taco in there. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that was that Matt Williams Taco team. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was that.
Yeah. And Matt
like
Williams is
sophomore or
hitting.
junior.
Yeah, that was like logo 3 of 3 stuff from Matt Williams. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. Anyway, so TCU and Jamie Dixon really deserved an L, and I was thankfully that was a lot of good verbal, right? Thankfully, we were able to give them the L because we've never beat a Jamie Dixon led team, and he is definitely a Richard Horse. So, yeah.
All right, so I'm proud of you, Josh, for getting through that because if you guys saw what we were writing in the private chat right now, like
It's not good.
It's not good.
It's not good.
How
about that TCU game?
Out of
It's rated E
context
for everyone.
conversation. However, that being said, I'm going to give my opinion, which is I definitely feel like TCU's head coach, Ben, I agree with you. But the weird thing is to me with him, right? Like you watch Kelvin Sampson and he's like up and down. He's yelling. He's working the refs the whole time. He's doing all of that, right? But Jamie just looks fake doing it. Like it just looks like it almost looks like it's an act. It's almost like when you talk to somebody and they're just fake and you can tell like their personality's fake or whatever. I felt like that was him. And he was like walking, even his own coaching staff. I don't know if you caught this a couple of times, just walked over him like, dude, what are you doing? Right. It just looks like a, how can I put this? The E for everyone way.
I'll say he looks like a cartoon character is what it looked like.
You mean like a pineapple?
No, that's no SpongeBob.
I mean, there was a time where he literally went like this. Look, you can't physically hurt somebody, so like it's like all your effort to not only YouTube viewers can see this, but it's like he just gnashed his teeth so openly, like it was just weird, but
it just looked fake.
It was over the top.
Like it was legit. Like Kelvin Sampson, when he's over there, he looks mad. Like I feel like he gets caught in the emotions of the game, and he's just an emotional guy, and he's just like, whether he's rightly or wrongly upset, right? Because 99% of the time it's just him working the refs. At least he looks legitimately mad. It's like when your dad looks at you when he's really mad at you for doing something, and then sometimes your dad looks at you like, man, I'm supposed to be mad at you, but I'm not. I'm not really mad at you. Kind of look. Like Kelvin Sampson looks like he's angry all the time. Yeah. And with Jamie, he just looks like a poser. for lack of a better term. He's and I don't want to spend the entire like episode talking about
because
Jamie.
we beat his team.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's not even. Yeah, exactly. Right. And again, this was the coach. Remember that threw a fit, and the AD threw a fit at the reffing, and got fined. The TCU got fined earlier this season. But he just looks so fake doing it, and it just looks like an act. And I think even the refs react to that. So that's all I'm going to say. I think we're 3 for 3 on who the Richard Equine is. And maybe we'll, if we have some other coaches in football season or otherwise, kind of keep this one going. Who looks like the bigger Richard Equine?
We should do that, like the Richard Horse of the Week or something. Like who's being unkind towards our team?
All right. So speaking of being unkind, UCF was unkind to TCU at home by allowing them to feel like they were going to win that game and then stealing it at the end. Now, this was a good game throughout the entire game. UCF led a good bit of it. Neither team got above 5 points as far as a lead was concerned, and when we were looking at it, when I was watching it, the comment I made in the text talk was UCF needs to look like they want to win this game, right? And they need to take the lead because we would get on these runs and then we'd have a stupid turnover, like DJ with that bounce pass, or who was it that dribbled into a double team and then just had a lazy pass out of it. I think it was not Shemari Allen, but
Antoine Jones, maybe?
Antoine Jones?
No, Antoine Jones, yeah.
Yeah, Antoine Jones.
He dribbled into a double team and then passed it like a high pass towards the base to the sideline. And then it was picked off. And it's like every time we got a lead, we did something silly. There wasn't there. I never felt like there was that until the very end. We're going to win this game, and I don't care. I'm taking this game over from anybody. Now, DJ, as much crap as the entire fan base has been given DJ, the last 7 games has been what's carried the offense for this team, right?
Oh, yeah.
And this game.
I think we lost Roger.
Hold on. I have to take a picture of this. Hold on. I have to do this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So hopefully Roger comes back, but I know I'm going to continue his thought on DJ because Roger said this may happen.
Right.
So Josh is just you and I, so we're just going to riff on TCU for the game against TCU. But what he was, I believe, trying to say, I don't want to speak for Roger, is that DJ has certainly come on extremely strong over the last 7 or 8 games of the season since his. Oh, hold on, is he back? He's back. He's back. Okay. I'll let you finish your thought then, Roger, because we were enjoying you frozen too much.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like for the audience out there, I apologize. I told the guys beforehand we've been having all kinds of internet problems all day up here in Northwest Florida. They're building new buildings near my neighborhood, and I think they've destroyed some infrastructure. So I'm not even supposed to have internet until tomorrow morning at 8:30. So I'm gonna take this for what I can get. Now that being said,
last 7 games, DJ, go ahead.
The last 7 games, DJ has really stepped it up, and he's stepped it up in tough moments, right? So like when we start talking about some of his teammates, Avery has not played as well in the last 7 or 8 games. He felt like he was picking it up, and then all of a sudden he just disappeared, right? Shemari Allen, earlier in the season, he was picking it up offensively. Now he's still consistently good defensively and has been a facilitator and has taken over the point at times, which has been good. And I think has opened up DJ because he hasn't been the focus of the defense. Right. So I all the time, like he was before. Right. So I think that was that was a very, 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 very good thing. So in spite of his offensive production, he was averaging like 8 points a game, and there were spurts where he would take over games. That went away, but he's still positively impacting the offense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the other hand, Sellers, he just feels like he disappeared, especially in big games, but he's still averaging something like 14 points a game in Big 12 play. But it's a quiet 14 points. It's a, hey, I'm being facilitated too. It isn't him taking over a game. DJ does that. At times he does that too much, right? Where he forces things. But Sellers has just kind of disappeared. So, at the end of the day, what it boils down to is DJ has been the offensive production for this team. And the last couple of games, the bench, which was a strength before, that was giving us points, have been more of a defensive help than they have an offensive help. And so I read somewhere, someone said, DJ needs a transfer. DJ has his foibles. He's way better than he was last year. His 3-point shooting is coming on the last two or three games. And I don't know if you guys remember me talking about this at the beginning of the season. DJ last year had a very, very flat 3-pointer. And what I mean was when he shot, it was the trajectory of the ball leaving his hand was very, very flat. And it caused him to miss a lot of 3-pointers. And it also caused the ball to rebound away from the paint where all of your guys are for offensive rebounds. This season, he changed the trajectory of his shot. And he started to do it a little bit towards the end of last season, where it's more like a rainbow three, which I feel like it took him a while to get the mechanics right for that. And it's starting to come together for him. But he's the only one that's consistently making threes for us. So, all of you that said that, I mean, number one, you might be voted the Richard Equine for this week, right? So, because that's just a completely asinine statement. Could he be better? Yes. Can he make smarter plays? Yes. He's hurt us in close games at the end of regulation, but at the same time, he's one of our best free throw shooters, and he's the guy that you want with the rock in his hand towards the end of the game. But he has made some silly mistakes, both offensively and defensively, in the last 2 or 3 minutes of games.
Yeah, and I thought one of the bigger differences this particular game is just he was in attack mode the entire time, and it was so evident at the end of the game where, we were just going to go to him. We were going to allow him to continue to kind of take over the TCU game, and that's what he did up until the point with, luckily it was only I think it was 25 seconds left when he actually fouled out. But which was crazy because we had 3 players foul out in this game. I looked at the stats after I had watched it, and I was like, man, we had 3 players foul out in the game. That's nuts. But anyways, I thought there was probably one of the things that I was also excited about. He only had 2 assists in this game, but not only were those 2 assists in big time moments, but he was attacking the paint. He was attacking driving the lane hard, and he would either look to score, which he should have, should be always looking to score and finishing through contact that he does so well. He had this one time where he just stopped on a dime and he spun around and did a turnaround jumper, and he just left his defender completely just in the dust. That was nasty.
He got a forward. They had a forward guard.
Yeah.
So I think it was from a switch.
He recognized the switch, yeah. But there was another time though where he drove the lane and it looked like he was going to go for it, and he stopped at a great point in the lane and dished it off to Diallo. Excuse me, dished it off to Diallo, and it was a perfect pass. So he's picking the right moments to be a facilitator as well. But probably no more evident with a minute left, or a little less than a minute left in the game. And UCF had the ball out of a timeout. They were going to take the ball up the length of the court. So everything was after a free throw or something like that. And And they ran what's called not to get too technical, they ran what's called a horn set. And essentially you have two players at each elbow, and you have two players kind of at the kind of on the baseline corners. And it was actually a simple, more like an NBA play, what happens a lot, where they just, players gets hot and it's nice. But the two players on the right side just run from their positions directly over to the left side of the court. And that allowed DJ to just take his man off the right-hand dribble downhill and, put up a great shot. He wound up getting fouled. He knocks down both free throws. That's the other thing about Darius Johnson this season. It's like there's nobody on our team, but honestly, nobody in this conference I'd rather have at the line in a big moment than Darius Johnson. I mean, he's shooting above 80% from the free throw line this season. He's been consistently very good. He's not above 90% like that. But by the same token, I can't remember the last time he's missed a big free throw that we really needed him to make, like down the stretch of a game.
Ice in his veins for sure.
Yeah, he really does.
Yeah.
And so, I was happy for him I'm happy for him, not only that he's finished out this season so strong and been like the clear, like number one, like leader on this team, and like the point guard that we've been waiting for him to be on this team. And he's had his moments, of course, but overall, just it's not even fair to DJ to call it a net positive. I mean, he's just been spectacular, and I'll agree with you, Roger. I mean, his shooting has been phenomenal. I mean, he's 37.5% 3-point shooter. That is, I mean, if out of your point guard, I'll take that all day long. And not only that, he's hit some big shots. So he hit some big shots in this game in the first half and the second half down the stretch. I mean,
he's creating more space for himself at the three. He's taking better shots, less contested threes as well. The other thing, I wanted to ask you about this because I put this in the text talk because it infuriated me. I was like, why on God's green earth did we have Shemari Allen inbounding that late? It was like, I don't know how many seconds it was left. I think it was like the one where it was like 4 seconds left. Why was he inbounding that? Or maybe it was more time left versus, DJ had fouled out. If anybody should have had the ball at that moment in time, it was Shemari Allen. Now, I get it. He's a 50% free throw shooter, but nobody else that was on the floor at that time was a good free throw shooter. So at least put with that important of an inbound so that they can't get a steal and then, put another 2 points up on the board. Why was he inbounding the ball versus anybody else on the team to get it in his hands in that situation? Was there any valid reason for that? Was that just a miscue? Or because if I'm Johnny Dawkins, I'm telling him, hey, look, DJ off the floor, Shemari's getting the ball 100% of the time. Now, he isn't the best free throw shooter, but
if you don't remember, it wasn't just DJ off the floor. It was Jalen Sellers had also fouled out. So and he's our second best free throw. Actually, percentage-wise, he's our best free throw shooter. He may not be as clutch as DJ, but he's our best free throw shooter. So with both of those options off the floor, I agree with you. You kind of want the best ball handler to make sure he has it in his hands. And I think that was inbound. Shemari Allen was inbounding it, if I'm remembering the play you're talking about correctly. And he passed it into Antoine Jones, who is not a very good free throw shooter himself,
or
and
ball
also
handler.
much more turnover prone than Shemari Allen would ever be in that moment. So. Yeah, it was a tough spot. I think it was one of those things where you just don't. I mean, we'd love to be able to practice every scenario, but I don't think you practice a scenario where both your starting front court fouls out. So, or starting backcourt, excuse me. Yeah. So that was probably just a weird scenario, and he just wind up making sure that, hey, Shemari Allen might have just grabbed the ball and said, you know what, I'm going to make sure that I get this ball in and I make the right decision out of the inbounds. And it might have just been a result of that. So
yeah, I was saying you put the person who is getting the ball in, you want that person to be the one person you can trust to get it to someone. I don't care who.
Yeah, that probably could have been CJ Walker in that scenario, passing the ball out too. But guess what? He was also fouled out.
So I want to go back to DJ for a second because I know there, and we'll go forward in a moment. So DJ, before he fouled right before, and all that just happened, he was doing some things that I got made fun of on this podcast, which was DJ right hand dribble, step, jab forward, 2 feet behind the line, and is exquisitely hitting a 3 with that rainbow over and over again. He's been doing that game after game after game. And it's one of the multiple things that he's been doing really, really well. And sometimes you take the good, you take the bad, and that's the facts of life, right? There are some things at the end of the games you're like, ah. But the reality is he's been just doing so much better recently, and even previous games. Like, it's pretty much Sellers DJ.
Well, I mean, to your point about the bad things, right? Like, remember where he was by the sideline and he fouled that guy late and pushed him out of bounds, and they were in the bonus, so they got free throws. I mean, with like under 2 minutes left, that was a dumb decision, right?
You're right.
Those happen.
Was it? No. I think it was later than that. It doesn't matter. That's the type of decision that I'm talking about, that he just makes some, like a junior point guard with a lot of time under his belt. It's just inexplicable sometimes on some of the things that he's doing, but the good outweighs the bad when it comes to DJ.
I don't think we're 16-14 if he's not on the team.
I agree.
And that's where I kind of go to it. So now there's this game was also another one that was just, this is what we thought we were getting when we were in the beginning of this Big 12 season and Kansas happens. Like, there were close games where we could get to we could stay even and surge forward and do a little bit and chip and not have the bottom fall out. And we've had that for a couple of games, not just this one and others. And then there's just, again, Houston is an amazing team. But
it's just closing out games.
Yeah. We knew as soon as they got 2 or 4 or 6 over, it was over. Well, like the surge just wasn't going to happen.
This was a hard-fought game.
Yeah.
It was a close game between two really, really, good teams. UCF shot out of their minds. I mean, our shooting percentage has gone up. And that's something we've been looking for. We shot 49.1% in this game. TCU shot 42.1, had 2 extra possessions. We were 6 of 14 from 3 points, and I'm glad we stopped shooting, because it seems like we win games when we're over 73 points, and we win games when we are shooting usually 12 or less 3-pointers. So 42.9% from 3, and that was all DJ. They shot 8 of 20, and that was primarily early, and shot 40% from 3. Free throws, they shot 65.6%. We shot 79.2. Rebounds, we out-rebounded them 34-32. Offensive rebounds were similar, 11-12. We out-rebounded them defensively, 23-20. Assists, they had 19 assists. We had 13. Steals, 6-8. Total turnovers, 13. Not 18. Not over 20. 13 turnovers. So we took care of the ball. Points off of turnovers, very close, 17-16. Again, these small things, these small stats, right? The assist to turnover ratio, you hear me talk about that all the time. That's the difference in these games, because the margins are, even the ones where it was more than 2 points, it was always within the last 2 minutes where it becomes an 8-point or 11-point lead, because we're fouling them and getting them to the free throw line in the last couple minutes, trying, it's within 2 or 4 points, right, and we're fouling them, getting them to the free throw line, trying to make something happen. So again, even the games that don't look close on the score are close within the last 2 minutes in the game. So again, this 24-20, as far as fouls were concerned, relatively evenly called. Right? Not BYU the first game where they went to the line 20 some more times than what we did. So, really, really good basketball game. Fun to watch. Really went back and forth quite a bit. We were worried there towards the end that the guys weren't going to be able to pull back, but they found that extra gear and found a way to win late, which is good for them heading into the tournament. And pretty much we've been talking about the NIT. I think this solidified their bid to the NIT because Kansas State won against Iowa State, which I felt like when we played them, they were right there for a loss, right? They were on the ropes. And we missed an opportunity with Iowa State. But going back to your net rankings, we're still 10 or so above Kansas State in the net rankings. And I believe that we've pretty much solidified a postseason for ourselves in the NIT.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about that. And we might, depending on how we play this week, I mean, we may be able to move up to a top seed in the, NIT, a really, good seed, and we'll see what happens from there. But I agree with you. The game, what I also liked about this game, and you mentioned the 3-point shooting and just the amount of threes that we shot. I mean, what I really liked is the game plan. Outside of DJ, the game plan was really evident from the beginning, I think, of they were making it a point to not only go inside to some of our big men early, but that was a little bit less of that and more of just having our guards just get downhill and just drive the paint. I mean, we had a lot of our threes in the first half, especially, came from just drive and kick situations, which is the exact type of three that you want a shooter, catching and shooting with. And so we had a lot of really good ball movement. I think it was like, if I remember correctly, at the point of the game, it was one of the best overall basketball plays of the game. It might have been towards the end of towards the end of the first half. But forgive me if I'm forgetting what point it was in the game. It was just an amazing play. It was DJ running from the dribbling from the left wing towards the top of the key, and he hits Shemari Allen with this like amazing bounce pass as he's cutting from the right wing, and he immediately catches it and makes an extra bounce pass to Diallo, who dunks it through for the bucket. I mean, it was just a really good, simple, straightforward spacing basketball play that was just smart decisions, 3 in a row, and it just it showed how well that this team is playing together, how well DJ and Shemari were just kind of clicking on all cylinders from a facilitator standpoint at that point. And so just overall, it was a good, and you mentioned the free throw shooting as well. Or you mentioned the 3-point shooting is all DJ, right? Like, so that was 5. We had 6 threes, I think, on the game, and he had 5 of them. He went 5 for 6 from the 3-point line, but he also went 10 for 10 from the free throw line.
Mm-hmm.
And so 10 of his career high 33 points came from the free throw line. So that's just big. I mean, that also just shows you the game plan too. We're not settling for the threes. We're creating the opportunities for ourselves and our teammates by getting downhill and being aggressive with the basketball. And if that means that we're kicking out for a shooter, shooting the best 3 that you can have, the catch and shoot from the, drive and kick, then so be it. But if not, then you're going to take it into the defender's chest and you're going to try to finish at the rim. And even if you miss that, or you get to the free throw line, he's going to knock him down. At this point, he went 100% from, went 10 for 10 from the line. So that was great to see as well, just as another kudos to
multiple passes in the paint.
Yeah.
Right. So we're starting to see that now, that part of the game, and we're seeing people come in and timing it right. So
this driving the paint when you can, like, I understand West Virginia zone all game pretty much, and so sometimes that's harder to do, but this drive in the paint, 14 threes thrown up, tons of regular field goals, like that type of game plan is what we do to win. We're not going to shoot out of our minds out of 3-point range unless Sellers and DJ go off. That's just not really going to happen.
Well, I mean, this game and DJ went off, and that was enough.
43% is a big number I'll take 43% all day long from a free.
I agree, But I like the fact more that it was only 14 attempted
Yeah,
shots.
agreed.
That's the key. Not 38, not 30, not even 25. Like when they drive the paint hard against most teams, they do really, really, really well. And there must be a reason it isn't happening as often as it is. I don't know if it sets its defensive adjustments, whatever, but some games it's really amazing to see, except for the gentleman on the bench in a boot. That might be an interesting because Sia did go down, and he was in. I saw him when I was looking at the replays. I didn't realize until I watched the replays of some of these things that he's getting up on one foot, clapping and applauding with a boot. Might be preventative, but he had a boot on his foot. So he's been doing
he walked off the court with he didn't really walk off the court. He had two teammates underneath both arms, helping him off the court after the game was over. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not a fun. The way he turned that ankle. That's just as somebody who has broken both my ankles in my life. That was not fun.
So when Shemari Allen was helped off, that was the same. They did the same thing too, and it might be preventative but who knows? I don't expect him to be playing tomorrow or at the Oklahoma State game.
He will not. I don't think he'd play the tournament. I think the earliest he'd be back would be the NIT, couple weeks, depending on how bad it is, right? So at the end of the day, like we said earlier, he started hitting his stride, so to speak, right?
I know.
And it sucks because he's, if we can have, he's an extra big that we can put out there with the other bigs, right? And if he's hitting his stride and being a positive, both offensively and defensively, that gives us an advantage because he's even been hitting some threes. You know what I mean? So it's a huge advantage on the glass, and it's advantage for us defensively as well.
And the NIT starts on April 2nd in Indiana, so I think you get in 3-ish weeks or so. It might be a possibility. But yeah, that was just disheartening to see him, and doing so good in multiple ways defensively, throwing up that 1-3 he might hit every game, but really bodying inside. Like that's what we really that's when we do our best, when we're bigger and sometimes stronger than teams, and we are. Like Houston's a great case in point, but amazingly no one from our team had more than 2 offensive rebounds, and Houston had 2 with 5 and 6. So but they're Houston, that's a whole nother thing.
All right, let's absquatulate to the next topic and get to UCF football. So UCF football, unlike what Alan thought, is actually kicked off their spring ball today.
That was funny.
So we got to see a lot of stretching. We saw some movement as far as Williams moved from quarterback to cornerback. And we also saw some very, very, very notable people left off of the depth chart.
Yeah.
Someone we were excited about that came to us from UF by way of, I believe it was Clemson. He was at
before. I think so.
So the running back room, right? With us bringing in Montgomery, there was going to be some question as to who was going to go. And we're missing a big name off of the running back room.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's a pretty deep running back room. So what are you going to do? I mean, there's, I don't know. I mean, how deep can we get? 5, 6, 7 players? At some point, you want to get on the field, right?
I mean, I remember when we were super excited about the speedster that DeMarcus Bowman was or is, and him bringing depth to that running back room, but he just didn't seem to be able to see the field last year. And this is what we've talked about on numerous episodes about different sports. It's like we don't know what goes on in practice or the meeting rooms or whatever it is. And for whatever reason, he wasn't able to crack the lineup last year. And so I think he probably saw the writing on the wall, not only with who's in front of him, but who's coming in this season. Not only Miles Montgomery from Cincinnati, but certainly our two, freshman running backs that are highly touted recruits as well. And so I think he just saw that the opportunity for him to get some minutes and get some significant playing time this season wasn't necessarily on UCF's roster. And so I wish him the best, but it's kind of potentially in this particular case, it might've just been an NGE situation, for UCF.
Demarcus Bowman is who we're talking about as well.
Yeah,
I don't think I ever said the name. So local
No,
product.
Ben did.
Former
I apologize.
And NGE is not good enough for those who don't remember the old George
O'Leary speak.
Yeah.
O'Leary had a lot of 3-letter acronyms for things, but yeah.
All right. So one of the things that's going, since we were talking about, camp, Josh actually has an opportunity to peek behind the veil this week. So we're going to ask him to make sure he's looking at the linebackers. And it seemed like, it's day one of spring, and
they're not in pads.
Coach Malzahn had his happy face, which he did not have during the season last year.
Yeah.
You could see every game that went on. It was just kind of like, it went to, do I really have to be here? He was excited for spring ball. I think he gets as excited as the players do to start a new season. And, one of the things that he mentioned was the defense and how excited he was on how the linebackers look. So I do think that he's excited about that. And that's one of the things, again, and I've mentioned it here before. I feel like Ben, even going back to Nightline days, the last 3 seasons, we've been talking about linebackers, or 4 seasons, we've been talking about linebacker is the biggest question. And then, who's going to be the DBs that earn their starting positions, because we do have some depth there. So Josh, your mission, if you choose to accept it, is, and again, I don't expect you to see a lot, but if you want to, let us know what KJ's throwing motion and release point is, how his stretches are, and whether the linebackers are war chant approved. If the linebackers are war chant approved, you're not giving too much away by saying that. So
I'll ask what I'm allowed to say or not say, and I will tell you that is pretty interesting, because I don't usually. I remember the George O'Leary days where we would just show up to practice, and there was a lot of people out there, and it was good conversations. I'd always see the normal people you would always see at practices, some media, some friends, some fellow young alumni, and it's just weird. Like, I'm pretty sure the only way you get to see a practice is if you donate a lot of money. Not yet. Working on it. Or if you happen to be related to UCF in some fashion. So, I'm going to be out there in a couple of days from this recording, and we'll see what happens. I'm excited to see what we're going to see, which is going to be without helmets and pads and all of that. But from the small clips we've seen on X, formerly known as Twitter, of was it like KJ throwing a little bit, and Gus like, yeah, good job. Like, there's been some stuff online, like the small clips from a couple of the people who are at practice. Like, okay, this and Gus looking all kind of happy and excited.
I feel like Gus is excited about this season because he feels like he has enough pieces to compete. That's what I feel like. But with KJ, look, Gus knows what he had with JRP, right? I think he knew that JRP was a work in progress as a quarterback. Okay. I feel like he felt like he had some advantages in the run game because of JRP, but unfortunately JRP is not 6'4" and 240 pounds. right?
You know,
So
I would have taken 5'11" and 240 pounds. It was really the biggest thing on JRP
he was listed as 6 foot and I think like right around 205.
Yeah.
So he's not a small guy. I mean, if you've ever been
No.
around him, he's not a small guy. But when you're talking
No.
about the wear and tear and someone who
Yes.
had to, he was fast. I mean, dude, when he's not injured, right?
Yes.
He is fast. But that style of play and you know, playing to his strengths means that he's going to get beat up like a running back, and he's not. When you're having to be so dynamic, you couldn't be that. Now, KJ Jefferson, he's big enough where he can throw defenders off of him at the college level, right? You're not going to do that to NFL guys, but at the college level, you can shrug people off and Ben Roethlisberger them, right? And then be able to throw the ball. And I think he's also excited about the defense. I think he's excited that he's got a solid defensive coordinator in the house that he trusts. And I feel like that'll allow those position coaches to really focus on you know what they were supposed to be doing before, not trying to learn how to be defensive coordinator. Addison Williams is gonna grow from this, and I feel like he's happy he's got a few linebackers that have the size that you need to play Power 5 football. Now, whether they pan out or not, I don't know. But these guys are not just, you know, transfers from the FCS. These are some other P5 transfers with starting experience, not Scissorants, who's been around everywhere and was injured and never played, right? These are guys that have played significant snaps for Power 5 teams who you know, have proven themselves and have the size that we need at a Power 5 level. So I think he's excited about that. I think that's what you're seeing, is that he feels like he has a chance with the roster that he has. And he's also in his element because he doesn't have to pretend that he's going to not coach the offense, right? He's come back out and said, hey, I'm going to coach the offense. By the way, I hope we're not in mid-season form as a fan base saying Gus, Gus, the offensive play caller, what is he doing? He doesn't know what he's doing, like dumb move, all that other fun stuff. Gus is a good offensive play caller. Okay. That's what his strength is. He's a pretty smart guy. He's made some silly, sometimes coaching decisions that I've seen, him do that we've all questioned. But at the end of the day, I feel like he feels like he has a staff around him that he trusts. And I feel like he feels like he has the players to make a mistake and it not end a game, because the defense can stop the other team. The offense doesn't have to score on every possession, or doesn't have to score an obscene amount of points to stay ahead. Yeah. Baylor last year was the prime example of that. So at the end of the day, I feel like he's in a better position, and that's exciting to see. And he's like the rest of us. We're all excited. Football, this is the first step towards football season. And if that's what you devote your life to, you have to be excited about it, to spend that amount of time, as coaches do all year long, not just during the season, right? The hours and hours and hours, and getting home at 2-3 o'clock in the morning and being back at the facility at 5 o'clock in the morning. You have to love what you do, and to do it for 20 years.
Of course. And so a few things. I think KJ Jefferson has got to be super excited about just the amount of weapons that he has around him. As many of us have been saying for the last few weeks leading up to the spring camp, and Alan in particular has been talking about this a lot. Who's our third wide receiver? Definitely, that's a question mark. I think, like, who's the guy that's going to really kind of step up into that position of being kind of our third. I don't want to call him a wide receiver 3, but it's more like third option at wide receiver, because we know that Xavier Townsend is going to play a lot in the slot. But so that's definitely a question. Bradell Richardson. Wow, I can't speak now.
Let's try that one more time.
Braydell Richardson. You got it. You got it.
Richardson. In
Braydell
a
Richardson.
video
Okay.
from Coach Malzahn.
There's been a lot of even beyond the video or anything else. There's been some talk in camp and preseason where he really is living up to the hype.
Awesome.
That you remember Coach Malzahn earlier this year came out and said, "This guy's the real deal." Like in his words, he's a real guy. You know,
he's a dude. He's a real football player.
He's a real football player.
A real
right?
football player. Yeah.
The coach speech stuff. But there's other players. Other players know. It's just like Trey said. You know, when a couple weeks ago when he said, "Hey, these were the guys that we saw that we knew were going to be good." Right? There's already commentary about him that backs up what Coach saw. So I feel like, you know, when we're talking about who's going to be the number 2 receiver, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not Richardson. And go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say, because X got a shout out too by Coach Malzahn today. So, listen,
X is most dangerous though. He's not the guy who's going to be running. Down. I mean, he's fast, so he can outrun other people. But where he's most dangerous is if you can get the ball to him in space in a zone defense and give him time to work. So
for now,
that's what I feel.
For now. Maybe that expands. But listen, if we're talking now, we have potentially 3 wide receivers doing some work, and a freshman is a part of that mix. Without looking beyond those 3, I think that might be why Gus Malzahn is really happy at this point. Like, again, I know we're not even in pads. I know we're way too early, but to me, this might be part of some of the excitement that we're seeing, which is great. But yeah, I don't want to discount X yet. I actually think he's going to step it up. We'll get that clip in by October, November, see what happens.
Yeah, I'm not worried that we have talent and speed in the wide receiver room. I'm not really. That's a little bit of a question mark, but I think the actual, main question on offense is is our offensive line going to take the next step next season? And obviously, we're never going to know the answer to that until fall starts because
center.
We don't see any of that. We won't see any of that in spring. As far as we won't be able to really truly tell beyond just what the coaches may say.
I don't know. I think that we'll get more out of the scrimmage than we think, especially as it pertains to center.
So.
Because one of the big questions that we have this year is who's going to play, and we had it last year, is who's going to play center consistently.
The entire season, yeah. We feel like we had a revolving door at the center position. Yeah, I think we're going to need the offensive line to truly take a big step this season. I think we had an okay year last year, but as you mentioned, the center position never really being able to solidify that. It was almost like we couldn't recover from Matley leaving us, and we had some issues there. I mean, it's one of the reasons why JRP was running for his life a lot of these games, and he had to use his legs because the offensive line had issues, and I feel like because we have such high-powered weapons around, on the outside and just in general in the skill positions, that it gets overlooked. Some of the deficiencies we have in the offensive line. So for me, that's one of the bigger questions.
And I feel like the difference this year is for KJ and with KJ. KJ Jefferson at Arkansas didn't have the ability or the offense that had as much motion that we have. He had a more traditional SEC style, pro style offense where he was at before, which means if there was a design run or if it was a run, most of his runs were off of broken plays. I feel like using him more thoughtfully or more purposefully as a running quarterback with the option game, I think is going to allow him to shine more. So for KJ Jefferson, I think this offense is going to feature him more and allow him to really shine. I also feel like if that is the case, Ben, and our offensive line doesn't gel, I think we have a better option with KJ because he can shed those tackles and get yards after contact. So knocking on wood, as long as there's not an injury, right? I feel like he's better equipped to deal with that than what JRP was. JRP is going to beat you with speed, but I feel like KJ Jefferson's more durable. So even if you get 5 or 6 yards, you don't have to break one, right, to positively move the offense. If you get 3 or 4 yards on a broken play, you're still moving the offense forward, and you're setting up a 3rd and manageable or a 3rd and short.
So maybe I hadn't got a chance to see any of the press conferences today after the first spring practices, and I imagine you guys did. I think this is, again, another question, but like, if I were to ask Gus Malzahn a question, I would ask him, like, how wide open is the number 2 quarterback, like, battle? Like, because it just, to be honest with you, it kind of feels like it should be wide open. Like, it should be really.
I will say this right
battle.
now, coming into this season, Trujillo, and I know I'm not saying that right,
Yeah.
but he's the number 2.
That's just a prediction, or
really?
No, he's going to be the number 2. He's shown enough, and he's shown that he's good enough to be the number 2. Our reclassifier, right, from last year,
EJ Colson,
yeah, Colson's coming in, but he's a true freshman, and he's got to work on his body a little bit. He's light, I feel like Trujillo is good enough of a backup quarterback that, I mean, he's not. Neither one of them is going to be what we have in KJ Jefferson, right? But I think Colson is so. I don't even know if he's 18 or he might have just turned 18. It's going to take him a hot minute, whereas Trujillo's already had a year in the offense.
Are you confusing Riley? Because Riley Trujillo is going to be a freshman, true freshman this season. I think you might be talking about Dylan Risk. Are you talking about
Dylan Risk? I'm sorry,
yes,
I meant Dylan Risk.
It's like,
yeah, Riley Trujillo is a true freshman.
I don't know why I was
think
thinking
he might have
Trujillo.
a good chance of winning that job, to be honest. But yeah, maybe Dylan Risk could be another guy instead of Timmy McClain that would be the backup role. But I think it is pretty wide open in spring, going all the way.
You know what? I didn't even remember that Timmy was still on the roster.
Yeah, well, that's
how sad is that?
That's the reason why I brought it up, is because, Timmy McClain, obviously got significant minutes last year. He had to come in big games and big moments, but I don't know whether or not they've necessarily found any type of answer as a backup quarterback, or even somebody who would need to come in as a starter with Timmy McClain. So I think that competition is wide open, and I think that potentially, maybe even all the way down to EJ Colson, which I agree. I think he's just young and he needs to learn. He needs a full year to learn. But I think it's pretty wide open between Trujillo as a true freshman, Dylan Risk as a second year guy, and Timmy McClain, who's kind of the incumbent backup.
Yeah, I totally forgot about McClain. I don't know. And here's the thing with McClain, though, is he's going to have to show progress to me in this season, this off season, because he had the opportunity,
right,
and there were a lot of things that went sideways with that opportunity. And the biggest knock on him has been the entire time was his the mental game. Right. So if he's shown progress there, and that way the coaches can trust him to run the offense the way that they're designing it to run, that's where I think he can make a difference, because athletically he's gifted. All right, Josh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I was gonna say, other than the risk and all that stuff, So from some of the videos that I've seen already that have been on Twitter, I'm not going to call next. I'm sorry. Elon, if you really want, you can donate to get rid of this duck, and I'll say X for you. On Twitter, we saw a couple of videos, and I believe number 9 was the second one that came up after KJ. So it might be seniority at this point, not skill level. But I think at least in the order of progression, that much I can probably figure out in a few days. I think Timmy is the next up after KJ. I mean, it's a very, very, very clear number 1. And Ben, to your point, number 2 could be all over the place. But do you like in a crunch time situation, and KJ can't play for some reason, right? Well, it's just whatever. In a crunch time situation, what happens? Do you give it to someone who's been in there, or do you go with someone who hasn't had a start? And it's going to be a very interesting question. We'll see what happens.
All right. Okay. So, for me, that's spring is going to be really interesting. And I'm enjoying the fact that we can sprinkle football back into the discussion again. The one other thing, because we've kind of been following along and it really does impact UCF quite a bit, and we were texting about this quite a bit, is the news this week that the SEC was pushing for the SEC and Big Ten were pushing for a significant amount more as far as revenue out of the college football playoff. And in the past, it was split evenly amongst the conferences as far as the payout from the playoff. And now they're pushing it so that basically the Big 12 and the ACC would split 32% of the playoff revenue, whereas before they each got 40%. So it's an 8% cut in playoff revenue, and they're pushing for basically a first round bye, in the playoff. So I feel like, and I'm just going to say this way, the current setup they're talking about is 3 automatic bids for the 2 Power 2 conferences, then 2 automatic bids for the ACC and the Big 12, and then 1 for the G5. So I'm gonna ask a couple of questions here. One, do you think that automatic bye is fair? 2, do you think they are just floating that to position themselves to get more revenue out of the playoff model? And 3, do you feel what do you feel the Big 12 and the Big 10 are going to get out of this? Because clearly they're going to win in some way. So those are my 3 questions. I'm going to let you guys talk about that.
Go ahead, Josh.
Sure.
Because we used a lot of F words in that conversation. I'm just saying.
Oh yeah.
It was like bam, boom, onomatopoeia. It was amazing. Let me tell you this. This is what's going on. I think it's just negotiation. At the core of it is just negotiation. We're gonna throw something, I'd say, at the wall. They gave some percentages, right? These 2 conferences with the new reconfiguration had 72 or some odd percent of the total invitational, seats, because, undefeated teams should get in there, right? And that's what they should get.
You mean like FSU or like UCF 2 years in a row, or
either. You pick. It's a pick 'em. So I get they have statistical numbers to all this. To me, it's a let's see what we can get away with, or the beginning of a negotiation. Because the reality is, if everyone else but those 2 take their ball and go home, who are they going to play? If you want to, if
they're not going to, it's a win-win either way, because from the playoff perspective, from a playoff perspective.
I agree, but this is, to me, it's just a negotiation tactic, and it's not a bad one to start. I feel like some of that will come to the middle, but I will tell you, when we get to the point where we get to NCAA and basketball negotiations, if that branches out or breaks off, who's going to be the bully in that one? Our conference. Yeah. So I feel like
and the ACC as well. Like,
yeah. So the totality. Well, the totality of where this all goes, I feel like they're probably going to get more money. Yes, we're going to get. This is where UCF's unique. Everyone else in the Big 12 might be frightened about getting less money. You know who isn't frightened about getting less money? Us. Maybe Houston.
So let me pause you there, because here's the thing. You're right in that point. The thing that I didn't mention in those questions was that Brett Yomark is also doing his own negotiating, and what he's negotiating on is tourney credits. So he wants more tourney credits for the Big 12. So another way that the Big 12 can separate itself is say, hey, you want to make that argument for the Invitational? Cool. But we've got 9 or 10 bids every year to the NCAA tournament. So, hey, our league is bringing in the eyeballs. We've got the most people participating in the tournament out of all the leagues. We deserve a higher amount than what the rest of the SEC brings to the table, because the SEC doesn't have that many great basketball teams. Yeah. So if you want to play that game, and that's not conjecture. That's one of the things that Brett Yomark is actively doing right now, and his push is our competitive advantage is basketball as the Big 12 conference. Yeah. The ACC used to have that. But the teams that we're talking about, especially with regard to expansion, that are talking about leaving Tobacco Road, right, are the basketball powers that were in the ACC. Yeah. SMU's not going to help you there. No. Stanford is not going to help you there. Cal is not going to help you there. Far.
Well, right? So look who we brought in.
Finish making the point. Yeah. The point is, at the end of the day, what Brett Yomark is doing is, I'm going to take my position of strength and position myself as the third best conference, and the ACC with FSU and what they're doing and what everybody else is looking at. Because remember, ESPN can right now say, hey, we're either going to keep riding this train because they have a look in, right? But by 2025, right, we've got a look in, or, if that's the case, then we're going to let those people slide into those other conferences, and the ACC is going to be screwed. Yeah. And I can tell you this right now, the FSU, if some of this stuff goes through with the SEC and the Big Ten from a football perspective, where the ACC is taking less of a cut, it adds to their argument that the ACC is holding them back financially.
I mean, they are. They are. That's a given right now. So I will say this, and to your point, you saw that push for basketball for a while. Houston, right? Probably one of the main reasons, other than Fertitta, that they're in the conference. BYU has never been forget Baylor. I'm talking new people. Cincinnati, they're typically good, right? BYU typically good. We're surprising people. You talked about SEC. We still have more quad one wins than Alabama and Auburn, and they're in the top 25. We have then look who's coming. Arizona State, Utah, Colorado. Sometimes they're good, right? Like, it's not like,
hey, Missouri went over in their conference.
Yeah, well, they've had some problems, but that's what I'm saying is the all-in on basketball and pretty darn good at football has to be the position. You have to have some type of power leverage, and we have that from basketball in spades. And basketball isn't a nothing type of money winner, right? Like, tournament credits can bring a lot of money. I mean, between Cincinnati and Houston, and even us a little bit, we left a couple of those coming back to the American. But imagine getting 10 or 12 people into the NCAA tournament each year, or somewhere even close to that. Well, and expanding the tournament credits. It would be...
Well, think about this. If you're transitioning the thought process that they're trying to leverage in the playoff or the invitational, I'm going to stop calling it playoff. It's all about TV viewership, right? It's what it is. It's the invitational. So if you transition that thought process, you can make the same argument in basketball. Say, hey, you want to make that argument in football? Cool. Guess what? On average, we're bringing 10 teams. You want to expand it? Cool. But you're going to give us auto bids.
Yeah.
Right? Because we
More
play
than
way
one.
tougher schedules than you do. And I know, Ben, you're kind of side-eyeing that, but that is literally the position that that Brett Yomark is using right
Oh, no,
now.
I'm not side-eyeing it. I'm not side-eyeing the position that Brett Yomark would have to or would be put in. The only thing I'm side-eyeing is like, why should any team get auto bids? I think it's a bunch of garbage. Like if we all agree that these are the best conferences in America or these are the best teams in America, then they'll be able to earn those spots by playing the dang game. What a concept. What a concept.
Are you talking about football or basketball?
Listen, we jumped the shark
against other teams.
We jumped the shark on what should happen a long time ago.
Yeah, you're right about
what
that.
I'm
I'm so like this. Well, this just brings me back to some of your original questions, which I don't remember.
Ben's yelling at a cloud and other things too.
Yeah, I mean, it just brings me back to what you're like. I don't remember all three of your questions, but I think that they should. I think that those at the table, I guess, these other conferences that are at the table, Big 12 being probably the most powerful at that table outside of the two that are joining together to say that we're the best. I think that they should call their bluff. Go ahead, leave. See what happens. Go ahead, leave. Leave the whole thing. Take your ball and go home. Leave they should call their bluff. And it just goes back to what I agree with what Josh originally said. I mean, it is a negotiation tactic and everybody kind of gets it. And everybody, just like me, kind of gets a little annoyed by it and just kind of like, but why should they get a bye automatically before they play the contests on the field? Like, why should they automatically get a bye no matter what? Like, it doesn't make any. Like it's just again, and I know we've jumped the shark on this a long time ago, but it's just like everything about college athletics right now, especially college football, really almost exclusively college football. Actually, I should lump the rest of the sports in with this, but it is so like everything that they argue about is everything but what happens on the actual field. And that just really, really annoys me as somebody who never played football.
That. Nobody can none of this is about that. It's about the money. That's what it is.
I'm not allowed to I'm not going to just accept it because I know that fact, Roger. I'm not saying that. Okay, well then, we could just stop talking about it because I'm just supposed to.
No.
It doesn't matter if I accept it, I guess.
No. I agree. Listen, I agree with your premise, 100%. Yeah. You know that. You know how I feel about all of this. I think this is the degradation of college football.
It's disgusting is what it is.
It is. It's 100% that way for a number of reasons. Not just because it's a collegiate game and nobody's under the auspices that they don't make money or anything like that. But it's not a level playing field. It never has been. No. And that's okay. But that doesn't mean that you don't cut. And UCF is a perfect example of this in 2017 and 2018, right? That doesn't mean that you take the ability to compete away.
Right.
At the same time, you've got the same situation. Look no further than our Big 12 tournament. We're essentially playing we have to play 3 games to get to the tournament championship, whereas everybody else doesn't either. If we're playing in the same conference, why the heck are we doing that when everybody else can't? So there is precedent for it. My position on this is, and I guess what I was trying to illuminate was, don't should yourself, because it's about money. And that's why the Invitational is what it is, right? And at the end of the day, what we are doing, and what if you can't see it as either a college football only fan, Brett Yomark at the very beginning of his tenure said, and he was brought in because he's a basketball guy and he's got the basketball things. What is our strength as a conference? And losing Texas and losing Oklahoma, blue bloods, right? In college football, although Texas hasn't done anything in a decade, they haven't done anything in basketball in a decade either, right? It's the other teams that have been carrying the load, right? But what have we been doing? What is his strength as a negotiating position? It's basketball. And that is the one thing that separates us from the ACC. And that is the reason that, when we're talking about these separate, I can tell you this right now. Brett Yarmark is not going to make the Pac-12 move, which is bite the hand that feeds you. And so what he's not going to do at any point is advocate for, and even going back before Yarmark, what the Big 12 didn't do is bite the hand that fed it. The ACC has done that. The Pac-12 has done that. The Big East did it. And we saw what happened to the Big East when we joined, right? Yeah. So the druthers, what's going to end up happening is there's going to be a power 3. And the reason there's going to be a power 3 is because you're right. They still need to play us, but there's a certain level even within the power conferences because there's consolidation. And I was saying it on Nightline since I started looking at the Disney and the ESPN balance sheets in 2016, 2014, actually, because I was on the calls. But at the end of the day, what Brett Yormark is doing right now is he's positioning us to be the 3rd best conference. And if there is consolidation, we're the ones going to be absorbing others, just like we did with the Pac-12 versus the other way around. And his predecessor, give him credit for inviting UCF, BYU, not Utah, I'm sorry, Cincinnati, and I don't remember who the 4th team is right now, but Houston, because nobody really cares about Houston except for maybe in basketball now.
That's cool.
But, give him credit for acting and stabilizing the conference instead of biting the hand that fed you. Had the Pac-12 taken the same amount of money that the Big 12 was getting, they would still exist as a conference today.
Yeah, so I obviously agree with that. And it's certainly all about
and I agree
money.
with you. It's not right.
It's all about money, and it's not about the fans. It's not about the players, but it's certainly not about the people who are paying money for tickets or anything like that, because it's not about the fans at all. But what would be interesting, though, in this new era of college football, football, not really necessarily with college jerseys on, not necessarily college football anymore, is what would be interesting in this whole process. Because if we're talking about blowing it up as well, it's just such an interesting process to me, because it's hey, we need to make sure that we're like set up for the future so well, but we're also going to hang on to the thing that's been around for 100 years, which is called this conference name. That's the funniest thing about it to me, is like the Big Ten, they're always going to be want to call the Big Ten. Vanderbilt is always going to be want to be in the SEC no matter what.
Yep,
and
exactly.
So like, it just doesn't matter. Like like they want to hold on to it, because what would be actually good for the future of college football in this new era, if they're going to blow it up anyways, is to actually just create 3 or 4 conferences like professional football would do, and have them be more regional, and you have a regional schedule and a few games that are outside of your region, and then you have a legitimate playoff and a road to do that, to get to that. I know I'm speaking from a fan's perspective, so not that anybody cares about what the fans want in this whole situation. So I just think it's interesting how they claim the reason why they're doing all of this is to set their sport up for the future, and yet they want to hang on to everything that is rooted in 100 years of history, because it's rooted in 100 years of history. And I think it's ridiculous.
They're doing it for the tax break, and they're going to hang on to the tax break as long as they possibly can.
Yeah, and that's the biggest have your cake and eat it too situation I've ever heard of in my life.
I agree. It is at the end of the day, but it's like I told you, like back when we were in Nightline. And I know I keep going back to Nightline, but we've been talking about this for literally since 2016. And Andrew didn't want to talk about realignment, but we would slide it in there all the time, right? At the end of the day, and Josh, I promise I'll get to you next. At the end of the day, the best thing that could happen for college football is, and I've been saying this since 2016, since we were going through all this realignment hoopla with the Big 12 back then, is that college football has a commissioner that has real power, not relies on the NCAA, who has to deal with all this, the tax exemption, because that's really where all of this is coming from, right? Is their status as a nonprofit organization, not for profit, nonprofit
Who's
organization.
paying those taxes? It's the fans who are getting.
I agree, but if you're looking at it from their perspective, they're getting all this revenue, they're consolidating the brand. We knew that there was a bubble as far as how much people could get paid, right? And so ESPN and Fox is moving the most valuable pieces from a TV watching perspective, but even that is skewed because they're the ones who control who gets put on the right channels, right? On the most viewed channels. If you put UCF on ABC, when we were at the Black Friday game with the Cows, they got great ratings, right? Because you have the access to the TV sets. But at the end of the day, they're consolidating brands because ESPN does not make money. And I've said this before, until the playoff. Literally, they are in the red until the commercial revenue from the playoff comes into account. So for them, they have an incentive, ESPN, and who just, by the way, paid for the full rights for the playoff, for the next iteration of the playoff, right? They have an incentive to have their teams that they own the rights for, that they sell the commercial space for, that have the highest ratings on it. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a dollar grab. So what can the Big 12 do? The Big 12 is being as smart as possible with all this. But for college football, the best thing would be to have a commissioner, go ahead and start paying the players and bring that all in-house under a corporate structure, right? Pay the taxes and then have collective bargaining. That would be the best thing for the sport to fix it. But in order for that to do that, that means Ohio State has to hold their nose, right? And have the same deal as what UCF does. And that's the difference. Go ahead, Josh.
So it's what a lot of people don't know. So yeah, the Big 12 is a 501c3 organization, which is intriguing. What most people don't know is the NFL is a 501c6, so they are also a nonprofit organization of a different ilk. The 3 and the 6 are different. I'm big in the nonprofit space. I can get the details in a business podcast if we ever do that again. But the reality is that there are so many things. I love Ben's rant because there's so many things that don't make sense, but they're doing it all for money. At the end of the day, why do we even have this conversation about the Big 12? I wish Big 12, Big 10, and SEC trying to grandstand and do all this? It's money. It's why are we going out to Utah for a conference? Well, not next year. They're both coming. Why is Utah coming to Florida multiple times? BYU and Utah coming to Orlando for a football game. A, it's going to be pretty cool. B, money. So it's really cash rules everything around me. It has been, it will be, and unfortunately, Ben, it's not going to stop. But I'm not sure where it's going to go. So I'm at least happy we're on this side of the fence versus where the Cows and a lot of other people are.
Even beyond the Cows. I mean, think about Virginia Tech or even Miami at this point.
Yeah.
I think we're better positioned going forward than what Miami is.
100%.
How crazy is that?
Yeah, that's nuts to think about. We are for sure in better position than Miami right now, no doubt. Because I mean, you think about it, like they don't have as much foundational ground to stand on than even FSU does right now. So, and they certainly don't have the backing of the conference that we have. So it's an interesting point that we are probably in a better position than Miami.
Here's the question. Is Miami the P5 Cows?
I think they've been the P5. Well, I don't know if they've been the P5 Cows. What's the equivalent of that one team that just talks about their recruiting class every year and never does anything on the field? I guess
Texas
that
A&M.
might be the Cows didn't get that first part either, so they don't really get the recruiting class to brag on either.
Well,
so.
they did actually back in the 2000s, remember? Because they were taking on all of those guys. Remember JPP and a bunch of those other guys that were highly rated, but they were taking players under the academic standards and were doing a lot of things back then to bring those folks in. So, I don't know. I mean, the Cows had all the benefits in the world. So did Miami when they joined the ACC.
Both squandered them.
And they both squandered them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they haven't won a Big East or an ACC title. I'm trying to go back to see if they've even won a ACC championship. I think they have. Okay, it won its first ACC championship in 2022-2023. So you can't say they're the P5 Cows because they actually won a championship in something in men's basketball and football.
Yeah, but think about where they went. What Miami was as a brand before. Right.
Oh,
and where
I agree
they
with
are
that
now.
part of it.
It's no longer conference championship is no longer the dividing line for them because they won the national championship so often. They're not even in the running for a national championship or playing for a national championship. Haven't been. They didn't even make a conference championship until 2023. And I can't remember what year it was, 2000 or 2002 or 2003 that they moved to the ACC and have not been relevant at all.
I know,
and
like a couple years removed from one of the greatest college football teams of all time. It's just wild. I mean, they kind of just squandered their opportunity to be a powerhouse, I should say.
Yeah. No,
so
you're 100% right.
Where's the give back? Where's the give back to the fans, I think is what you're asking. Where's the give back to to the teams? So
and I'll just say quickly the original premise of this conversation. I mean, I just think that the rest of the conferences, in particular the Big 12, needs to hold firm and needs to be a tough negotiator in this process back at the Big 10 and the SEC, because we do.
I think they're going to be the facilitator. I don't think they're going to be the ones. I think they're going to be the facilitator. They're going to be the ones in between. I think the ACC and the G5, unfortunately, are going to be in the position where they're going to be in the and I'm not talking about all the teams in the ACC. I'm talking about Jim Phillips is going to be the one that's going to have to do the pushback. I think Brett Yormark is in a position where he can be the good guy and side with the SEC and the Big Ten. Remember the alliance? Remember the alliance, right? And how it was the Big Ten and the Pac-12. And, guess who was on the SEC side? The Big 12. Guess who they voted with? The Big 12. I think the Big 12 is in the prime position that they don't make noise, but they facilitate and negotiate as much as they can get out of it. But I think they're going to be with the Power 2, and they won't be at the level of the Power 2. But if anybody gets stripped, it's going to be the ACC. The teams that are worth it that they don't take are going to be absorbed in the Big 12, and I think those are going to be your three conferences moving forward. That's what I think is going to happen. And whether they go in and they fully merge and regionalize and do whatever, I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I'll say that's probably the best
scenario for UCF
topping that you could put on this crap sandwich that is the all of college football. So I guess of the horrible scenarios that could occur, that's probably the best one for us UCF fans. So I guess I'll take that if that actually happens.
Yeah, I feel like for once we ended up on the right end of realignment.
Thank goodness. So,
all right. Before we move on to a few things, I know, Ben, you wanted to talk about, I just want to go real quickly back to this, the net comparisons for basketball. I think that's important to talk about. And you'd mentioned that you had some net comparisons between last year's team and this year's team.
Yeah, I'll be quick about it. I mean, we talk about the benefit of being in the big, in the Big 12 and being in such a better conference, a 7, 8, 9 bid league as opposed to at max 2 bid league that the American is in most years. But as far as performance in relation to the net, this year versus last year. Now, last year we went 19-10. We had a good, or 19-15, excuse me. We had a good overall record and won our first round game in the NIT. But we finished the season at 71 in the net rankings. Overall, in quad 1 games, we actually had 10 quad 1 games, believe it or not, last year. We went 3-7 in those games. So this season we actually had a few more than that. We had 3 more than that. We went 4-9 in those quad 1 games. But I think one of the differences between our two seasons this year and last year was we went 7-1 in quad 4 games this year versus 9-0 in quad 4 games last year. But our quad 3 games, we went 4-4 last year and went 3-2 this season. So we had just much less quad 3 and quad 4 games overall. Most of our opportunities, as we always like to use that word, we're up in those quad 1, quad 2 games. And so just having more opportunities in the first 2 quadrants, I don't want to get too nitty gritty into the net, but it certainly has helped our overall standings this season. And you see that in the relation to other teams that are in different conferences, namely the Cows that we just talked about, how they're having this, arguably one of their best basketball seasons, if not their best basketball season they've ever had. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I looked at it earlier. I'm not exactly sure, but I believe right now they sit about 10 rankings spots behind us in the net. They had one of their best seasons ever, and they're sitting at 78 in the net, and we're sitting at 61. So I think that just shows a huge contrast between this season and last season as far as the conferences that we play in. And so, it can only, I think just being in the Big 12 is just a huge benefit to us, but also competing in the Big 12, as we talked about earlier in the show, is a huge benefit to us overall.
All right. Thank you, Ben. And, I think that further illustrates kind of what we were talking about before, and even what we were just talking about with regard to basketball. You know what I mean? And and how we're positioned. So, all right. Well, we don't have Alan this week. I think he was at a car dealership. I think he's buying a new whip. I don't know what's going on. I know he had a lease situation going, but I've ridden in Alan's car, and he only rides baller status, so I can't imagine what he's getting. He does like his Infinities, though. I'm just going to put that out there. All right. So let's move on real quickly to baseball. And I mean real quickly because we're at 2 hours and 12 minutes. So much anticipated after, I think we were RPI up to number 6 after beating number 4 Florida at their place 9-6. It was a midweek game. Ben Vespi, again, showing that I think he's our best starter, to be honest. But then we turn around and get swept at Oklahoma in our opening series in the Big 12. The first game, that was a close match. We should have won. We had a lot of mistakes defensively that we made. That's uncharacteristic for this team and also for a Ben Wallace team. So it's tough. I don't know where this team is yet. I think a lot of it's going to be on the pitching staff. But offensively, we really didn't get it done. Oklahoma, their batting average was high, and we got creamed on Sunday. I mean, I think it was 14-2 or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, it was 14-2. It's tough. It's really tough to get a bearing on this team early, I think, because of the pitching staff. That was the question that we opened when we talked preseason. What did our pitching staff going to look like? What's the depth going to look like on the pitching staff? I think we do have some good guys in the bullpen. I do think that some of the guys that are starters today are going to be moved in favor of others that may be in the bullpen and rotated in to be starters. But we just didn't hit well. We didn't hit well this weekend, and our pitching wasn't good enough to get it done. And defensively, honestly, we should have taken at least one game out of this series. We're good enough to take at least one. I feel like this team's good enough to have taken two, but we just didn't get it done this week. So I don't know how we're going to fare in the Big 12, but I do have a lot of confidence in this hitting, and I do feel like we're gonna play better, kind of like the same way with softball. You know what I mean? Softball's kind of the same way. We played some big matchups early out of conference, and they lost those games, but they came back in the Big 12 conference and opened up the conference and played well against Kansas. So I'll leave that to our update, our other sports update. But the big question to me is still going to be pitching. Is that pitching staff going to come through at a Big 12 level? Because there's some real teams, as Coach Malzahn likes to say, in the Big 12 when it comes to baseball. And Houston, is a really, really good baseball team. Even Cincinnati is playing halfway decent, and they really have no business being a decent baseball team. So, any thoughts on baseball?
Yeah, I think it was just a weird weekend. It's a long baseball season. I mean, 3-4. So the game on Friday night gets postponed to Saturday morning.
Yep.
I thought Ben Besby pitched a gem in that game. I mean, he really pitched well. He only gave up one run as far as earned run goes. Unfortunately for him and for our team, there was not only some errors behind him, but there was a couple of he did his job in the sense that he forced a soft hit back to him, but that throw sometimes from the best pitchers, that throw from the pitcher's mound area to first base doesn't prove to be the easiest throw for a lot of pitchers. It's just crazy how that happens a lot at all levels of baseball. And unfortunately, there was a couple of throwing errors from Ben in that game. We lost a really close one. Oklahoma scores late to make that game 3-4. And just the way a baseball season goes and the way the baseball series goes, I mean, you just kind of don't know what would have happened if that score was flipped in the other direction. Unfortunately, we lose that one, and then all of a sudden it kind of snowballs into the next two, I think. And so I wouldn't put too much stock in this particular weekend. Got a great top 5 win in midweek. We've won 5 straight against those guys from Gainesville, so that's pretty cool.
In Haterland, who don't want to play us.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I'll give credit to the baseball team because they've actually played us. But yeah, but certainly it was great to get our 5th straight win against them, and hopefully we can bounce back this week and make it 6, and we'll see what happens the rest of the season. But yeah, I wouldn't put too much stock with the weird weekend that happened in Norman, Oklahoma. I mean, they got a horrible weather delay on Friday night, and then that leads into a doubleheader on Saturday. But I'll also say, not to make too much excuses, that's also college baseball. That's baseball. You're playing a lot of doubleheaders because of weather delays and things like that. And so we need to show better response to that. And certainly better responses in the second game of a doubleheader after a very close battle in the first. We need to make sure that we can bounce back a little bit better than what we showed at Oklahoma.
And I'll say to this, they're playing us away. They're no longer scheduling us at home. So yeah. Haterland. That's what I call it. It's Gatorland is an Orlando staple. I'm going to call it Haterland. So, Josh, did you have something to say there?
Yeah, maybe the Big 12 is just a hard place to play on the road. Period. Like most people aren't doing well in basketball and football. Maybe iffy in certain areas. maybe just road games in this conference are hard for a lot of different sports. That could be it. But it's disheartening to see, I know it's a midweek game, but it's disheartening to see a great midweek game and then look like we have the shot to win, and then see Oklahoma basically get a run between two different games in about 10 straight innings. Something like it was. It's amazing. I'm not gonna lie, it's amazing. But I don't want to be on the other side of that. So I'm just like we shouldn't have come to too far of a judgment when we got shellacked at Kansas State in our first Big 12 game in basketball.
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting the brakes on this right now to see what happens in the coming weeks.
All right. So here's to hoping we beat the brakes off of Stetson and OSU as they are up next. All right, Josh, your sometimes funny fact of the week. Take it away, my friend.
This is amazing because I actually didn't write this one down. I usually prep and all that, but I do have it. Oklahoma State University is our next basketball opponent, and they've been playing in the Big 12 for several years. When's the last year? Several years. When's the last year that they have not won the first round game of the Big 12 tournament in tournaments they've played in? I need that caveat.
I don't know, 5 years ago. I have no idea.
That they have played in. You're throwing that caveat on there because that's throwing me off.
I mean, so I'll say why they were banned from the postseason for a year, so you can't add that.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit on our OSU preview with our OSU podcast that we had on. So make sure you check that out. And Nobra will have the link in the comments, right? Nobra, give me a head shake. Yep. All right. So make sure you check that out. I'm going to say the time before they were left out because as that just lends itself to saying like they win, just like our softball team wins they've won like 12 season openers in a row. I'd say the same as for OSU. They've had a strong basketball team and a lot of the reasons why it's kind of we kind of talked about that in that preview as well. It's why OSU has taken a little bit of a step back when it comes to their basketball program.
Yeah, it's probably starting with that postseason ban and not upholding their penalty issues. It was 2019, so Ben was just about right. 2019. I was
right.
Yeah,
5 years ago.
This year, we don't know what's going to happen this year, but 2019 was the last time Oklahoma State didn't get out of the first round of the Big 12 basketball tournament, which I found fascinating, even with everything else going on. Like, even with all the other things, like they've at least gotten to the first round the last couple of years. So hopefully we can make it a 5-year streak that goes down.
All right. Josh, quick update on UCF Sports. And I mean quick, we're at 2:22.
Quick. Okay, so I'm going to talk about UCF Sports and what is a quick update on them. Now, I'm not going to do that to all of you. So the women's basketball team is done. They lost their final regular season game, their final game, the Cincinnati 67-62. They're in last place, and they're done. They're done. And hopefully next year.
Only a cookie is done.
Well, women's tennis lost to Baylor 4-2, but for their first conference win, they beat TCU 4-3. UCF men's tennis is doing really great. They're 13-1. They beat Wichita State 4-1. They beat Tulsa. We can at least beat Tulsa in something 4-3 and 4-0. And we are, as I said, 13-1. They play Southern Miss next. That's a throwback to an old conference meet. What?
Historic start for men's tennis.
Yes, I mean I think 7-0 was their best start ever, or tied. So we're doing pretty good. In UCF softball, we beat Stetson 4-2 and won the series against Kansas, our first Big 12 series 2-1. And I think that last game we were going for a sweep, and it was like a 1-0 tight game at the end. We're playing OSU next.
All right, great. Thank you for that. Super excited about the men's tennis program. Remember, they play at UTSA. Make sure you check them out if you can. They deserve your support. And interesting, their first year after Roddick leaves, that they're 13-1. So congratulations to that team. They're really, really, really doing well, and super proud of them. So as I mentioned before, make sure you check out that preview that we had. Hopefully it gets out in Obra. I know you're going to have to burn the midnight oil before we play the game tomorrow. And make sure that you remember to like, subscribe, and thank you all for being part of this. Make sure you're sharing our content with others. We do it for you. We appreciate all the feedback that we've been getting. We've actually been getting some really, really solid feedback. And we apologize that it's 2 hours and 24 minutes, but it's just so much good content right now because of all the teams that are playing. And, you know, UCF, this is our first season in the Big 12. So go Knights and
Charge on. Oh, come on, Ben. It was right there. It was right there.
Charge on! You know, something exciting.
And should we talk about the thing that we were hinting